Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video, I am going to be showing you how I make strawberry cake. This is a recipe I use every time we make strawberry cake. It is not something I make often, but when it is requested for like a birthday or a gathering of some sort, it is one I go to. And so I'm just going to show you guys how I do it. It is super easy, but we need to get the long and like daunting part out first. But then after that, it's a breeze. So if you want to see how I make this cake, go ahead, stick around, and let's get to it. So in order to do this, you're going to need fresh strawberries, or you can use freeze-dried strawberries, the recipe said. However, I myself have never used freeze-dried strawberries. I always just use the fresh strawberries. And you need 400 grams, or I believe it's like 3/4 cup. I'm going to double check. Oh, no, not 3/4 cups. You want 3 cups of strawberries. So 3 cups of strawberries, or if you're like me and are going to use your food scale, then it is 400 grams of strawberries. So you want them cut into quarters as well. I've already saved everybody the time and energy of seeing me wash up the strawberries. So I am not going to show that, but I did just wash them. And now I'm going to get them cut into quarters and in here, this bowl, until I reach the 400 grams. So, turning on the food scale, place my bowl on here first, and then zeroing it out. And like I said, this is not a recipe I make often. However, it is one I make when it is requested by my kids or my husband when we have gatherings or birthdays. And we just so happen to have not one, but 2 birthdays coming up. And one of the birthday people requested strawberry cake. So I am going to make it. And like I said, you just cut them up into quarters until you reach 3 cups or 400 grams, however you want to do it. 400 grams of strawberries. I grabbed a 2-pound container of strawberries at the store, and it looks like I have maybe a pound or so left. So let's move on to the next, well, actually, I'm going to put these strawberries away so my family can eat them, and then I will move on to the next step with the strawberries. Okay, so now that I'm all cleaned up, I grabbed my food processor, but you can use a food processor or a blender, whatever it is you have. And what you're going to do is, and yes, all this is off. It's all cold to the touch, but you want to pour your strawberries in until they are like a puree. And this is the start of your strawberry reduction that you are going to need for your cake. Stick that lid on. Ooh, sorry, scared me. All right, and now it is all pureed. And ready to go into your medium-sized pan. All right, cleaned up. Now you need to turn your stove onto medium heat. And you want to bring this to a slow boil. And you have to stay with it because you got to consistently stir it so it does not burn. And the directions say about 20 to 25 minutes. But if you want to be exact, you measure it till it is 3/4 cup. What it's looking like, and we are just going to stir consistently until we get 3/4 cup. Have my timer set for 20 minutes. And if you measure and you don't get 3/4 cup, then you just stick it back in and continue to boil it out until it reaches 3/4 cup. Okay guys, we are 14 minutes to go on the reduction, and this is what it is looking like. It will boil if I don't touch it. You'll start to see the boil like that. But again, we want to consistently stir so it does not burn. All right, we now have 10 minutes until this reduction is done. And this is what it is looking like right now. Got to consistently stir. And make sure it's not burning to your pan. Okay, we are about 5 minutes left on my 20-minute timer, and this is how my reduction is coming. Okay guys, my 20-minute timer has gone off, and it is at this time you would take it off the heat and measure to make sure it is 3/4 cup of the puree. However, I am not going to measure. I'm just going to take it off the heat and work with what I got. If you do measure and you notice that it is more than 3/4 cup, what you're going to do is go ahead and stick that back down on the heat for another 5 minutes and consistently stir again to make sure you've got your 3/4 cup. Now, if I was making this and wanted to be precise, I would measure, but as I said, I'm just going to go with what I have. What you do is you pour it into a cup or a bowl like I am right now, and you let it cool to at least room temperature. And if you want to make this but you don't have the time to kind of do it all in the one day, the directions do say you can make the puree ahead of time and then store it in the refrigerator. I personally have never done it, but it doesn't mean that you can't, and I'm sure it'll still be just as good. Okay, now that I have the reduction done, let me just take a minute and show you everything that you're going to need. You're going to need a stand mixer or some kind of a way to mix your ingredients. You are going to need some baking powder, baking soda, 4 eggs, your reduction. You're going to need 3/4 cups of butter to room temperature. I just popped mine in the microwave for about 15 seconds and called it a day. Some vanilla, sour cream, salt, milk, flour, and sugar. I'm going to be doing, instead of cups and tablespoons and all that, I'm going to be using my scale and doing the grams of it. So I have my bowl that I'm gonna measure everything in. I'm going to zero it out. Okay, we are going to combine our strawberry reduction, sour cream, milk, eggs, vanilla. You need 3/4 cup of sour cream, or 173 grams. You need a 1/4 cup of milk, or 60 milliliters. You need your 4 eggs. And then the last thing is a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm just going to eyeball this. Good enough. And then this gets put into here with your puree. Once all of that is mixed in, we start the mixing. Okay, that is mixed and combined, so now I'm going to start with my dry ingredients. And for that, you need a half a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1.5 cups or 310 grams of sugar, and 2.5 cups or 325 grams of flour. So, half a teaspoon of salt. Then a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Two teaspoons of baking powder. And since I am using my bowl and my food scale, I'm going to measure out 310 grams of sugar, and then 325 grams of flour. Now, if you cared like I did the first time I made this, you would empty your puree mixture into a separate bowl, but leaving 1.5 cups of that in the mixing bowl, and then you would add your flour mixture or your dry ingredients. But I've made this a few times, and so other times I did not separate it, and it turned out just fine. So I'm not going to separate it this time. And while this is mixing together, you add your butter. It says a tablespoon at a time to slowly incorporate. However, and once the butter and the flour mixture is mixed, if you separated your puree mixture or your egg mixture, then you would slowly start adding that in at this time. But as you see, I did not. Okay, so once everything is incorporated, I took a 9x13 pan. They say, I believe it's 8-inch round pans, 3 of them. But I just do one big pan like so. And I already greased it with cooking spray. And all I'm going to do is pour it into here. Okay, I stuck it in my oven for 20 minutes. It still needed a little bit more time, so I did another 5 minutes. So now I'm going to stick my toothpick in, and it came out clean, so that's telling me that it is done. Now, to let it cool, let me take a minute and talk about things that I don't do that the recipe calls for. Number one, as you saw, I just combined everything. I mixed in the puree, let that go with all the egg mixture and all that. I let all that go in. Then I did all my dry ingredients and let that be. So I did not separate things like the recipe called for. Something else I normally do is I make them into cupcakes instead of 3 8-inch round cakes that stack on top of each other. Generally, I'll make them into a long 9x13 pan like I did today, or more commonly when I make them into cupcakes. So those are what I do that's different than what the recipe calls for. I believe everything else I do the same. Oh, I also don't measure out the 3/4 cup of puree to make sure that it says 3/4. I just go with what I think looks good, and that is what I work with. So that is everything I do differently. Now, the recipe that I am going to link below does have a frosting recipe that they suggest to go with the cake. I personally do not use that frosting recipe, so I don't know how it tastes. But I actually do not need to make my frosting today, as I do have some still left over in my deep freezer that I will be needing to use up. So instead of making a fresh batch of frosting, I'm just going to use the frosting I already have. So that is how I do the cake. It is really good. It is really a family favorite for us. And the frosting I use is a good one too. If you want to know how I make that frosting, let me know down below. And the next time I make frosting, I will be sure to add that one into it. Otherwise, I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your day and a great week ahead. And I'll talk to y'all in the next one. Okay guys, this is the frosting bag I needed to use up. So this is why I did not make my frosting today. But we are all frosted up and ready for the decorating, which I am going to hold off because I like to put little bits of strawberries on the cake. You need to do that right before you're getting ready to eat it. Otherwise, the liquid from the strawberries start to make it really gross like. So that will come on right before we start eating it.